Part 1. When control is not by violence, but by an operational model like a shadow enterprise. They did not appear as direct criminals. They were not visible at the transaction point, nor did they use violence to establish control. TSE Chi Lop and Liu Zhouhua ran their criminal operations like managing a business model, complete with strategy, structure, and clear delegation. The only difference being that, all activities took place outside the legal system instead of confronting authorities. They built a network stable enough to reduce the need for concealment, so that, the crime resembled an internal operation more than individual behavior. TSE Chi Lop, regarded as the Aces El Chapo, coordinated the Sam Gore network with operations spanning multiple countries, and estimated revenue in the tens of billions of USD. He acted as an operator, appearing as a legitimate businessman, traveling on a business passport, and not directly involved in transactions. Liu Zhouhua, focusing on production and domestic distribution, operated with a mindset of process control like a production executive, ensuring a stable supply of materials, chemicals and operating personnel, without individual dependence. The commonality between them was not the criminal act, but the system operational mindset. They exploited the fact that authorities often react to specific behavior, while the criminal model was designed to persist without attracting immediate attention. No need for violent action if the structure already controls human behavior. So the opening question is not, what did they do, but what is more dangerous? The criminal who uses violence, or the one who runs a criminal model as a long-term operating business organization? Part 2. Introducing the subject in the two cases, not describing the criminal act, but analyzing the system operational model. In this video, we do not recount the trade process or specific activities. Instead, the focus is on analyzing how two individuals ran a criminal network in the same way a corporation operates a system, with clear structure, delegation, and strategy. TSE Chi Lop operated according to a regional organization model, similar to a multinational corporation using intermediary networks, exploiting legitimate trade mechanisms to maintain anonymity. Liu Zhouhua operated according to a process model, focusing on production control and domestic distribution, optimizing supply and minimizing external fluctuations. The notable point is not the type of crime, but the approach. TSE did not need to directly intervene in every activity, only requiring the system structure to be stable enough to self-operate. Liu did not need deep delegation, but needed thorough control over every stage to ensure the operational chain was not interrupted. One created a model, difficult to investigate from the outside. The other maintained a model difficult to break from the inside. This video places the two models side by side to address a central question. When criminal behavior is run with a business mindset, is the legal system, which is designed to react to individual behavior, capable enough to handle a criminally structured organization? We will sequentially analyze the socio-economic context of the region, the operational mechanisms, and how both figures sustained activities without relying on direct violent action. They did not need to conceal every transaction if the structure made the transaction not seem unusual. And that is why the investigation into them did not start from their actions, but from the suspicion towards how the network existed too stably. In the following parts, we will delve into the regional socio-economic context, before analyzing how each person used a management mindset to run the crime. Part 3. Regional context. When the pace of market expansion outpaces cross-border oversight capacity. During the period from the late 1990s to the early 2010s, East and Southeast Asia entered a phase of strong economic development, especially in cross-border trade. The expansion of transportation infrastructure, ports, and free trade zones facilitated the faster movement of legitimate goods, but simultaneously created a gap for illegal activities to exploit these mechanisms. Control regulations were designed to handle individual behavior, while development exceeding the pace meant that authorities did not have time to adjust mechanisms to oversee organizational operational models. In this context, TSE Chi Lop employed an approach of blending into legitimate commerce, using international trade routes to conceal the underground operations. Conversely, Liu Zhouhua focused production within mainland China, exploiting rural areas with limited administrative control, relying on dispersion to reduce the risk of direct inspection. When authorities focused on major transport routes, local production was not seen as an immediate strategic threat. The common point is that neither tried to bypass the system with immediate dangerous action, but exploited the delay in oversight coordination between countries. Law enforcement agencies only identified crime when the behavior exceeded the quantified risk limit, but with a hierarchical or dispersed network model, risk does not appear as a sudden spike, but increases gradually over a long period, causing the system to react late. This leads to the question: if the oversight system is designed to prevent direct threat behavior, is it capable enough to identify a structure built to not create an obvious threat from the start? Part 4. TSE CHILOP. Operating from the periphery of the legal system, no need for presence to control. TCCC. Lope rarely appeared near the locations where the criminal activities took place. Instead, he maintained the image of an ordinary trader, and was even documented as appearing at international financial events. TSE's operational method did not rely on the ability to intervene directly, but on establishing a network structure stable enough to operate without the presence of the leader. He acted like a strategic coordinator, focusing on scaling up and minimizing risk by delegating authority regionally. The Samgor Group, the organization, TSE RAND, divided operations by geographical route, assigning tasks to independent groups, connected only through a chain of intermediaries. Instead of controlling every action, TSE controlled the system's ability to sustain operations by ensuring a continuous supply, establishing indirect transport channels, and using legitimate commerce as a cover. The cargo lines were disguised as industrial products or common raw materials, requiring inspection to rely on specific suspicions, something the network was designed to avoid triggering. TSE did not try to make the behavior invisible, but made the behavior look compatible with legitimate business activity, and due to the hierarchical structure, the investigation direction of finding the command center was almost impossible to execute in international investigation files. There is an observation: he not only avoided leaving a personal trace, but also designed the system so that his absence would not affect its operational capacity. Unlike criminals who act by force, TSE used organizational structure to create stable force. When there is no need to personally handle every step, the legal system struggles to assign liability when the criminal act does not stem from a specific individual, but from how the system operates. With such a mechanism, the question posed is, if a person runs a criminal structure in a way that their presence is not the decisive factor for operation, is the legal system, which assigns individual liability, capable enough to determine guilt based on strategic position rather than direct action? Part 5. Liu Joshua. Not scaling up by delegation, but maintaining control by grasping the source. Unlike TSE CHILOP, who designed the network based on a hierarchical organizational model, Liu Joshua approached it by controlling the entire production and distribution process from the starting point. He did not create a system that could self-operate when the person in power left, but built a structure directly dependent on his operational capacity. If TSE acted as a strategist, Liu acted as an on-site chief executive, focusing on managing chemical sources, processing stages, and personnel responsible for handling the product. Liu's main area of operation was rural China, where administrative control mechanisms were limited. Instead of concealing the scale, he concealed the process, setting up mobile production facilities, easily redeployed if discovered. Focusing on the process helped him ensure stable product quality, maintaining competitiveness in the consumer network. Distribution operations were organized as a vertical chain, minimizing the number of connection points to avoid exposure. This made backward tracing difficult to execute, as the structure was not designed to expose intermediate operational layers. In the investigation files, there is an observation. Liu did not hide by blending into the business environment, but by making the operational chain difficult to access from the outside. If the production source cannot be accessed, the investigation system only sees the end part of the process without being able to deduce how the entire system works. Liu's method created a different type of risk. If TSE built a system for long-term survival, Liu created a system to avoid disruption, regardless of external pressure, not relying on organizational structure, but on the stability of the supply source. Essentially, he did not try to make the system difficult to perceive, but tried to make the process impossible to stop, without breaking the entire starting point. The point raised here is what needs to be controlled first: the person who designs the network so it can self-operate, or the person who holds the starting point, making the entire system dependent on their individual action. Part 6. Direct comparison. Building a system to avoid the need for presence, or forcing the system to stop if the operator is absent. When placing TSE CHILOP and Liu Joshua side by side, the striking difference is not in scale or impact, But, in how they position themselves within the operational structure, TSE built the system, so, it could continue operating even in his absence, like a multinational corporation with sufficient management tiers to sustain itself. Liu, conversely, designed the system so that if he did not directly control it, the process would be forced to stop, preventing internal loss of control. One delegated to reduce individual risk, the other centralized power to reduce process variability. In terms of long-term existence, TSE's model is more sustainable, as the network is not dependent on one center. When the structure is designed as a multi-layered ecosystem, replacing the coordinator does not interrupt operations. With Liu, the high dependence on the executive role makes the system operate efficiently, but also creates a weakness. If the individual is isolated, the entire production chain stops. However, this also complicates the investigation. To break Liu's model, the exact operational point needs to be identified, while with TSE, the overall structure needs to be identified before inferring the role of the head. From a risk control perspective, TSE reduced risk by delegation, assigning tasks to multiple independent groups, making it difficult for authorities to determine the epicenter. Liu reduced risk by source control, making the operation only stoppable if the correct operational location is discovered. One optimized the system's survival capacity, the other optimized the capacity for continuous operation. And this is the difference. TSE viewed the network as an economic mechanism. Liu viewed the network as a technical process. So, the key question is not who is more dangerous, but in an investigation, should the priority be identifying the operator who can be replaced, or the operator who makes the system entirely dependent on their decisions? And if the legal system still focuses on assigning individual liability as the model that needs no individual to sustain itself, the most difficult type of crime to handle. Part 7. Analysis of culture, psychology and system response. When participants act not out of fear, but because the structure makes stopping more dangerous than continuing. In many criminal cases, individuals engage in the act out of fear of being threatened or due to immediate external impact. But in the networks of TSE, Chai Lop and Liu Zhao, they acted not out of personal fear, but because the system was designed to make leaving the structure more risky than continuing participation. When the process is standardized and duties are clearly delegated, the executor no longer feels they are participating in a criminal act, but are performing a part within a machine, even if that machine operates outside the legal framework. In TSE's model, participation is based on principles similar to economic activity. Perform the role correctly. Do not ask questions beyond the scope of function. When the network is hierarchical, the further the participant is from the center, the less they see the full picture. It's not that they don't understand the consequences, but they don't perceive their own action as the direct factor. Creating that consequence, separating perception from impact, is the way to maintain system stability. In Liu's model, the motivation is different, not concealment through delegation, but through the closed nature of the process. When a process is designed to operate continuously, participants know that disruption means elimination by the system. Continuing becomes the safer choice than exiting. This is not the psychology of a criminal, but the psychology of someone dependent on a mechanism that has operated long enough to create the feeling that existing within it is the normal state. Regarding social response, the problem does not arise from individual action, but from the moment the community realizes that the system has existed longer than the capacity for intervention. When the criminal act unfolds in a manner similar to an economic or technical operation, outsiders only ask questions when the system begins to affect stability, not when it begins to exist. So a notable question is raised. In behavioral criminal models, one needs to manage the person, but with organizational criminal models, what needs to be managed? The action, the structure, or the operational mindset? And is the legal system capable enough to analyze management mindset or only react to actions that have already occurred? Part 8. Open conclusion. When the legal system handles action, but crime is organized as an operational model. These two figures did not use violence to establish control. They did not appear at the transaction point, nor did they directly issue commands at the moment the criminal act took place. They built an operational system that made the criminal act a part of the process. And that process was so stable that the legal system, which reacts to clear actions, did not consider it an immediate danger sign. When the criminal structure is designed to operate parallel to legitimate activity, the detection system only appears when the impact exceeds the level of adjustment. TSE Chai Lop created a structure for the system to self-operate without the need for the operator. Liu Zhouhua created a structure that forced the system to stop if the operator was isolated. Two different approaches, but both based on a common mindset. If the behavior is integrated into the operational model, the system will not perceive it as a deviation until the model is no longer capable of providing cover. This leads to the concluding question of this episode. In criminal investigation, we usually look for who did what, when, and how. But when the criminal model relies on how the system is organized to avoid the need for clear behavior, is it still effective enough to prosecute based on action? And if the legal system is designed to handle action, who is responsible when the action has been replaced by structure and operational mindset? With cases that use a management model to cover criminal activity, the question is no longer, who committed the crime, but what mindset did the system allow to persist long enough for crime to be run like a business organization?